Russia's Su-34 appeared almost purpose-built to dominate the skies over Ukraine. The multi-year-old fighter was more advanced than anything Ukraine had in its aerial inventory when Russia launched its invasion. Combined with Russia's other fighter jets and bombers, it should have been enough to settle the air superiority debate within weeks of the war's opening phase. That's not what happened. While the Su-34 hasn't been irrelevant, it also hasn't become the overwhelming force it was expected to be. Instead, Ukraine has exploited a critical vulnerability in the aircraft. The code has effectively been cracked, and according to U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force veteran Wes O'Donnell, there's very little Vladimir Putin can do to stop the mounting losses. O'Donnell opened a January 4 video with a simple but telling question: why does Russia keep losing its Su-34s? We'll get to that answer later. What's clear from the start is that what the Su-34 was meant to be for Russia and what it has actually become in Ukraine are two very different things. Russia designed the Su-34 for exactly this kind of conflict. As O'Donnell explains, it wasn't built for counterinsurgency or campaigns like Syria, but for a high-intensity, state-on-state war against a peer adversary with layered air defenses. Many media outlets seem to agree. Militarny claimed as recently as September 2024 that the Su-34 represented an existential threat to Ukraine. Early in the war, Russia did use the aircraft for its intended role. Su-34s entered Ukrainian airspace and began dropping unguided bombs on airfields and hardened targets in an effort to weaken Ukraine's defenses. The aircraft can also carry guided munitions such as the Kh-31 and Kh-59 missiles, which Russia has used a devastating effect. But even with this so-called existential threat, Militarny noted that Russia couldn't keep using Su-34s to drop dumb bombs for long. Ukraine's air defenses made sure of that. Ukraine simply didn't fight the air war the way Russia expected, a subject we'll explore in more detail shortly. Forbes agrees that the Su-34 is Russia's premier precision bomber, which has led it to dominate Russia's precision strike missions using guided weapons. On paper, the jet should be a nightmare for Ukraine. O'Donnell outlines the basics. The Su-34 has 12 hardpoints, can carry roughly 8,000 kilograms, over 17,600 pounds of ordnance, and can reach speeds of up to 1,900 kilometers per hour, around Mach 1.5. It can be armed with missiles, rockets, and bombs, backed by a 30mm GSH 30-1 autocannon capable of firing up to 1,800 rounds per minute. By any measure, the Su-34 should have outclassed Ukraine's Air Force at the time of the invasion. It was supposed to be Russia's answer to sustained strike warfare. O'Donnell argues the Su-34 was never meant to be disposable, something Russia could afford to lose just to force Ukraine to expend air defense missiles. Instead, it was intended to be one of the central pillars of Russia's aerial dominance. In Russian doctrine, the Su-34 was meant to fly daily, apply constant pressure along the front, and shape the battlefield through persistent presence rather than occasional spectacle. It all sounds impressive, but it doesn't match reality. Rather than becoming Russia's most dangerous aircraft, the Su-34 has turned into one of its most frequently destroyed. Defense and Aviation highlighted this in a January 9th roundup of Russian losses, claiming that by January 1st Russia had lost 174 aircraft, with the Su-34 being the second hardest hit at 40 losses, just behind the much older Su-25 at 41. That's a brutal statistic. These aircraft were developed decades apart, and the cost difference is enormous. An Su-34 costs roughly $36 million, while in Su-25 is closer to $11 million, according to Armed Forces in EU. From that perspective, 40 down Su-34s arguably represent far greater damage than 41 lost Su-25s. And it only takes one more destroyed Su-34 to even the score. Ukraine's own Ministry of Finance claims Russian aircraft losses are far higher, 434 destroyed rather than 174. Still, 40 lost Su-34s appears to be the commonly accepted figure, with Defense Express also reporting it on January 18th. These numbers likely represent confirmed losses, meaning the real total could be higher. So what does all of this tell us? Not that the Su-34 is a bad aircraft. Far from it. Its specifications show it would have performed well in the war Russia expected to fight. But being a multi-role fighter comes with complications. As the name suggests, it's designed to perform multiple missions, and Russia has tried to use it for everything imaginable. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's return to O'Donnell's original question. Why does Russia keep losing Su-34s? The first reason is Ukraine's refusal to fight the war Russia anticipated. In truth, Russia didn't expect much of a war at all. Putin believed a shock-and-awe campaign would punch straight through to Kyiv with minimal resistance. So obvious was this plan that in March 2022, King's College London suggested Putin might be following a Nazi-era blitzkrieg model. While that label wasn't entirely accurate, the analysts noted similarities in the aerial domain. Russian planners expected Ukraine's air defenses to collapse quickly, command and control to fracture, and Russian strike aircraft to operate freely after the opening phase. Instead, Ukraine focused on aerial denial rather than air superiority. Acknowledging Russia's numerical and technological advantage, Ukraine concentrated on making the skies hostile rather than claiming them. Mobility, rapid responses, and layered defenses became the core of its strategy, and Russia's Su-34s had no answer. The Atlantic Council summarizes it well. Ukraine deployed Soviet-era systems like the S-300 and Buk M1 as an initial layer. Using shoot-and-scoot tactics, Ukrainian crews fired missiles, shut down radars, and relocated before Russia could respond. By the time Russian forces identified the launch point, the system was already gone. Russia reacted by ordering aircraft to fly low, a disastrous decision. Low-altitude flight slows jets and exposes them to anti-aircraft fire and shoulder-fired missiles like Stingers. These systems, normally meant for helicopters, proved deadly against Su-34s forced into vulnerable flight profiles. Ukraine had baited Russia into a trap, and Moscow's commanders fell for it. This environment was never what the Su-34 was designed for, and it proved lethal, not just for the Su-34, but for many Russian aircraft. Ukraine's goal, O'Donnell says, was to make the sky dangerous. Russia's response was to push Su-34 pilots to fly too often, too close, and in too many roles. That brings us to the second reason for the Su-34's exposure: role mismatch. This isn't about pilot skill or aircraft flaws. Russia learned lessons early in the war, but it continues to rely on the Su-34 as a multi-role workhorse, pushing it beyond its intended limits. As O'Donnell puts it, Russia keeps forcing a square peg into a round hole, no matter how many pegs get destroyed in the process. The Su-34 excels as a frontline bomber delivering guided and unguided weapons near the line of contact, but Ukraine's defensive strategy made that role untenable. Now multi-role has become every role. Su-34s launch glide bombs from deep behind the front lines and even substitute for damaged or destroyed reconnaissance aircraft. That's a problem. The Su-34 excels as a frontline bomber delivering guided and unguided weapons near the line of contact, but Ukraine's defensive strategy made that role untenable. Now multi-role has become every role. Su-34s launch glide bombs from deep behind the front lines and even substitute for damaged or destroyed reconnaissance aircraft. That's a problem. Ukraine has systematically targeted Russia's A-50 airborne early warning aircraft. After Operation Spiderweb in June, drone strikes destroyed multiple A-50s, leaving Russia with only a handful remaining. With its airborne surveillance crippled, Russia turned to the Su-34. In July, Army Recognition reported that Russia was adapting Su-34s for tactical reconnaissance. While fighter jets can perform this role, it introduces predictability. Reconnaissance missions require fixed routes and repeated patterns, exactly what Ukraine needs. Once those patterns are identified, the Su-34 becomes easy prey. By September 2025, Ukraine was exploiting this predictability. Military expert Mikhail Zyrakov explained that Ukrainian forces likely track pilots flying the same routes repeatedly, lulling them into a false sense of security before setting up ambushes. And Ukraine doesn't just destroy, Su-34s in the air. It hits them on the ground, too. Long-range drones and sabotage operations have struck Russian airfields hundreds of miles from the front. On July 1st, Ukraine attacked Marinaka airfield, destroying 2 fighters. Another strike damaged additional Su-34s at Mozdok. Even on the tarmac, the Su-34 isn't safe. Add to that the arrival of Ukraine's F-16s in August 2024. Using Western sensor data and Link 16, Ukrainian pilots now pose a real interception threat. Russian planners never expected this, and it shows. On October 12, Forbes reported that Russian bloggers were furious over claims a Ukrainian F-16 shot down an Su-34 roughly 50 kilometers from the front. Both the jet and its pilot were lost. The bloggers blamed incompetence at the highest levels, and they may have a point. Ultimately, Russia keeps losing Su-34s because it's tried to do too much with them in an environment that punishes repetition. Ukraine's goal isn't just to shoot them down, but to make every sortie as costly as possible. At $36 million per aircraft, replacement is slow and expensive. Since 2023, Russia has received just 6 new Su-34s, 2 per year, while losing 40. The math doesn't work. And that doesn't even account for pilot losses, training costs, maintenance strain, or sanctions that limit spare parts. Airframes are being cannibalized, readiness is dropping, and Ukraine continues to innovate. At the start of this video, we said Ukraine exposed a fatal weakness in the Su-34. That weakness isn't the aircraft, it's how Russia uses it. And Ukraine is more than happy to exploit that failure. 40 Su-34s down and counting. How long before it's 45? 50? At this pace, Russia could reach that number by the end of 2026. And there's little Putin can do to stop it. And with new weapons like Ukraine's FP-1 drones entering the battlefield, the pressure is only increasing. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more analysis on how Russia continues to fail at using even its most advanced weapons in the war in Ukraine.